Who are these people?
Right? And you have to do it on a global scale. It's kind of ridiculous. And if you're not following people like this guy, Jordan Schachtel over at the Dossier, I know he does some other stuff. But some of this stuff can slip through your cracks for sure. I doubt Cori Bush is even paying attention to this, especially with them pushing Green New Deal stuff that this can be slipped into. I feel like you need to be a little careful. So this is a story all about how the Federal Reserve is using the green transition as a pretext to build an American social credit system, right? And they're using Europe's model as like a pilot exercise, essentially. So have you heard anything about these social credit systems, Colin, like in China and things like that? You been paying attention?
I haven't really been paying attention to this, and I didn't read this article beforehand, so this will be more learning for me.
Yay! So, I get to be teacher.
You get now, so yeah.
So the Federal Reserve has offered a green light for the first component of an agenda dedicated to turning the American financial system in a complete censorship and surveillance regime. And all indications are that they intend to install further intrusions on liberty in the US dollar system under the guise of saving the planet from climate change. The Dossier reported last week on the Federal Reserve's pilot exercise that is slated to both begin and conclude in 2023. In the piece, we discuss how what was become commonly referred to as ESG, or the climate change agenda, or the green transition, is acting as a Trojan horse for the continuing centralization and the increasing of surveillance in the American financial system. Excuse me. Across the West, this movement is now acting as the chief catalyst for the implementation of Chinese Communist Party-like social credit score systems, right? So to continue this crucial conversation, here's some more detail about how we can expect this pilot exercise to move forward in the coming months. In all likelihood, the Fed will follow in the footsteps of the Euro system. So in January 2022, the European Central Bank, which manages the Euro, launched its own climate stress test. They quickly resulted in July 2022 Climate Action Plan to include climate change considerations in the Eurosystem's monetary policy framework. So here's that release. So the ECB takes further steps to incorporate climate change into its monetary policy operations, right? And this is straight from the European Central Bank. Over the span of just 7 months, the ECB transformed their monetary policy to support the green transition of the economy in line with the EU's climate neutrality objectives. In order to decarbonize the European economy, the ECB will proceed to limit the share of assets issued by entities with a high carbon footprint. I'll read that again. Limit the share of assets issued by entities with a high carbon footprint. The ECB will... Right.
Not...
But that they get to dictate how much...
Not get rid of it.
Right. And that they get to limit whoever they say is doing, high carbon footprint. You know what I'm saying? Right. And they get to decide how much they limit. So the ECB will also limit the borrowing power of institutions that are not considered carbon compliant. The Europeans now suddenly have a green social credit score system. Will the Fed follow suit? To get a sense of the Fed's commitment to the climate hoax, we can review a prominent Federal Reserve official speech last month at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. Many consider the left-wing policy shop as the most influential think tank in the United States. I don't necessarily agree with Schachtel's thing on the climate hoax. I do think climate definitely is I don't know how he's using this specifically. Right. But I mean, I think it's one of those classic, yes, climate change is real. Yes, there's definitely going to be environmental problems caused by it. And it's definitely caused by carbon emissions that we continually pump out. But, it doesn't mean that any of these things need to be implemented to deal with that. Right? Like, I'm under the opinion of, at least. You know, especially when the U.S. military produces more carbon emissions than like a lot of things. You know, it's a top-down problem. The big corporations get away with doing it, and they're going to fork all this onto the bottom percentage anyway. You know, don't use those plastic straws, kids. You know?
Right.
Yeah, so to get us into the federal commitment, right. So this is their like hour-long like Michael Barr, right? So Vice Chair for Supervision Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, and David Wessel, Director of the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy. So this is definitely a fucking weird think tank nonsense, right? And he's just governor of the Fed, essentially, right? But just in case you wanted to like,
the job of every worker.
I mean, they had a whole fucking hour-long video that I'm not going to play for you, but I will copy the link address there and put that in chat if anyone wants to actually go through it themselves and find any good snippets of terribleness that I'm sure is in here. So if it would just let me go past the video that I just turned off. Anyway, so they pulled some of this out in the article. So Barr writes or says, as our nation and the world grapple with how to respond to climate change, banks are increasingly focused on the risks that climate change brings to their balance sheets, said Fed Vice Chair Michael Barr, an institutionally progressive Biden admin appointee. I think those are oxymorons myself, that phrase, but he added, emphasis in bold, the Federal Reserve is working to understand how climate change may pose risk to individual banks and to the financial system. The Federal Reserve's mandate in this area is important, but narrow focused on our supervisory responsibilities and our role in promoting a safe and stable financial system. Barr, who has served as an advisor to the Gates Foundation and the Clinton Foundation, and worked in government as a top Obama administration Treasury Department official, continued, in the near term, we intend to work with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the FDIC to provide guidance to large banks on how we expect them to identify, measure, monitor, and manage the financial risks of climate change. In addition, we are considering how to develop and implement climate risk scenario analysis. In that regard, next year, we plan to launch a pilot microprudential scenario analysis exercise to better assess the long-term climate-related financial risks facing the largest institutions. So then on Thursday, the Fed announced that it was launching its pilot exercise on climate. So, if it mirrors the Eurosystem process, the Federal Reserve's pilot exercise will indeed become the first step for the framework of a Federal Reserve imposing a social credit score system attached to the US dollar. The banks are arguably incentivized to go along with the program, as those who go along with the agenda become the ultimate middlemen for all US banking activity. So, the New York Times, a major advocacy journal for the green transition, commented that the exercise would improve a Federal Reserve that often lagged behind its global peers when it comes to talking about and coming up with a plan for policing risks related to climate change. Reuters, another pro-climate catastrophe publication, cheered the pilot exercise, writing that the potential effects of climate change, namely through rising sea levels, worsening floods and fires, could destroy trillions of dollars of assets around the globe. The banks involved in the exercise, Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, and Wells Fargo, hold a combined majority of all U.S. banking assets, meaning a Fed decision would likely have the top-down effect of crushing small and community banks that do not have the resources to comply with its monetary edicts.
I was waiting to see where the shoe was going to drop.
Uh
I
huh.
was just waiting for it.
It's all over. The shoes dropped all over this. So, if the big banks complied with this hyperactivist Federal Reserve, which more than ever needs a manufactured crisis to take weight off its monetary policy failures, the American social credit score system will be here a lot sooner than many project.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I just noticed we're looking to protect the banks. We're looking to protect each other in light of climate change. We basically want to protect our assets in case the world burns. That's basically that's basically what I'm getting for this article. It's like, where's the care for the people? Where is the care and concern of normal people?
Insurance companies.
Fuck y'all. Fuck Chase. Fuck Bank of America. Fuck Wells Fargo.
Yes.
I don't care.
Yeah.
You guys can rot in hell for all I care. Basically, you have more than enough money. You know, where's the investment in the people?
Well, and this is directly again, like, people don't. You have to look at this as like, look, this is in congruency with a lot of other policy that we've talked about previously on shows like How Did We Miss That, where insurance companies are no longer providing catastrophe relief, like, due to financial risk for them. Right? Tie that with what's happening, that farmers in the Netherlands have been protesting, and in Germany been protesting, and where the farmers who are directly the cause of like producing food are getting sanctions applied on them for things like carbon emission and things like that that keep them from making a living. And you best believe that this is going to continue to be part of the problem there. Where if you're a farmer here in America, you might possibly have your assets frozen.
Right. I'm just thinking also in terms, we reported, was it here? Yeah, it was on here, like, I think over the summer, about the idea of like electric cars that, a lot of the parts have to be, you can't you can't even get
the carbon emission for lithium is high.
Yeah. But then like certain parts, in order for cars to be like a thing,
as opposed to
you can't buy.
They won't build infrastructure that would make things more efficient to move people. They don't build cities for people to like the infrastructure is just terrible. The city planning is terrible. Like, all of that forcing us to rely on like fossil fuels to literally go to work, come home. Like,
it's a way, I just kind of see the connection. It's a way to incentivize themselves in being green and potentially like, oh, we're saving the environment and all this stuff, essentially to protect their asses and assets, again, at our expense, because I'm sure they're going to promote, I could see it now, is the idea of like Pete Buttigieg was pushing like for people to buy electric cars. I'm sure that's going to be a part, like stuff that. I'm sure it's going to be kind of forced down our throats to do.
And sanctions and taxes on top of that for emissions.
I'm sure like if we have,
they've talked about climate lockdowns have been talked about with like the WEF, who's been pushing a lot of this like policy, which we know they control policy, right? And they're the ones who talk about it openly, right? Especially when we've looked at before the the Council for Inclusive Capitalism. A lot of their big stuff was over climate problems. And it's almost like using climate problems to, it's like the rich know that the time of the world burning is coming, and they better make sure they're ducks are in a row, you know.
Here's the thing with this. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with this, especially in like maybe in something like public transportation, for example,
Yeah.
like which is needed. Like I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it, but given like how I think generally in this country, public transportation is shit anyway, you know. But I think in terms of like the planning around like you know, like you probably saw this on Twitter today, but like in DC our subway system, they basically replaced the gates that are a lot more electronic that you can use your phone in order to pay.
Yeah.
But the gates are so freaking low that people are hopping over them, you know. Like they spent millions of dollars to replace the gates only for people to do variations. So now as a result, you know, like they're trying to crack down on people by basically saying, oh, we're going to target you if you hop the fence now, that we're going to start charging you.
Yes.
You know, talking a little bit about, oh, we need to pilot, but you've already wasted the money, you know,
Right.
like getting these new gates. And now you're trying to spend more money in order to maybe upgrade, if not maybe replace those.
Right.
You know, so it's like, so in a way, like I could see how in potentially how that can work in like certain industries, but except that these industries are just so shit and corrupt.
Yeah.
Like it's never going to work out for like the working class.
Well, it's like, I mean, while the banks are trying to save their assets, you know,